Well, we are still in Genesis. We are still in Genesis. It's got 50 chapters, and Genesis is awesome. It's just extraordinary. I was kicking myself for not coming back and reading this more often myself personally, because it's astonishing things in here. So I hope you think that today as well. So where are we? If you're just kind of catching up with us, we're in 28, and last week we had this incredible scene where Jacob pulls off this switcheroo, right? He dresses up in goat skins and puts on his brother's clothes and brings him food to his father Isaac, and kind of swipes Isaac's blessing he was going to give to Esau, and Jacob swipes it. It sounds like today's stuff. I know. It's crazy. So anyway, even despite all of that subterfuge and deception, Jacob has this blessing now from his father. And it's in line with what the angel had told his mother, that while he was even in her womb, that shows out that the older will serve the younger. So that's the case. But now where we left it last week was that Esau, the brother who was stolen from, is whopping mad. He is on the warpath. And it says, in fact, that he was consoling himself. You know, he's so hurt by this. He's consoling himself by planning his brother's death. Yeah, so that's how bad it's gotten. So at the end of last week, we realized that what has to happen, and his mother figured this out. That's his mother leering over in the top there. Has figured out that Jacob's just got to get out of town. Because if he stays in town, Esau's going to kill him. So let's get him a wife. So let's send him back to the homeland and get him a wife. And so that's where we pick up the story today. And we're just going to jump right into it, and we'll talk about it a little bit more as we go along. So here's Jacob. I love this picture of Jacob. He is confounded now in so many ways. So we're in Genesis 28, verse 10, and this is where he picks up about getting out of town. Then Jacob departed from Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and spent the night there because the sun had set. So he is all by himself. He's all by himself, and he's fleeing his brother, and he's on his way to his mother's family homeland in Haran. We'll give you some satellite views of where we are. Here's Israel. We're hovering about 25 miles over Israel. This is like the space station view of it. Beersheba is down here to this very day. It's that dark section down there. And you notice where it's right on the edge of all the white stuff to the right and to the below. White stuff is sandy desert. So it's kind of it's a very arid part of the country. Where are we? That thing on the left, that's the Gaza Strip where they launch missiles all the time into Israel. Those are my missiles right there, by the way. By the way, do you know that from that northern part of Gaza, they have fired something over 4,000 missiles over some years. So that's why they have airstrikes into Gaza, because they're trying to stop them from doing that. So there's the Gaza Strip over there, present day. On the right here, there's the Dead Sea on the bottom, the Jordan River linking up to Galilee. We're looking straight north right there. Jerusalem is in the center of the picture. And today, in today's story, Jacob is going to go from Beersheba down here up to the mountain ridge of Jerusalem and up to this thing up here, which is the town of Bethel. It's actually not even a town at this particular point. He's only going about 60 miles as we pick up the story, and he'll be up there in Bethel. From the sky, though, it turns out he's got a lot further to go, because here's the present day geography. He's right down here and only going to go to the 60 miles in Israel as we start this story today. But to find where his wife is and where his mother's family is, he has to go all the way up here into Upper Syria. So he has a long trip to go. So today, we're only going to take him a little ways before we take him all the way up to Syria. So let's go back to where he is. He's right smack dab, if you look at that, smack dab in the very center of Israel, as this amazing story takes place in verse 11 of chapter 28. So here we go. So he's there. He camps there overnight. He's all by himself. And he took one of the stones of the place, and he put it under his head and lay down in that place. By the way, just to be fair, that's a hard pillow? Yeah, it's a very hard pillow. That's what I was going to say. To be fair, the Hebrew is a little bit indistinct here. It's hard to tell whether or not he puts it under his head or whether he puts it beside his head. Doesn't make sense. It would say he went to sleep and put a rock beside his head. But that could be what it means. But anyway, we think he just used it as a pillow. It's a very hard pillow. So he lays down in that place. Now, before we go on to what happens, he's going to have a dream. You got to understand where his mental mindset is. He has just escaped his home with his father Isaac, his mother Rebekah, his very angry brother Esau. He's just escaped by the skin of his teeth, and he's there all by himself. All by himself. Now, contrast this for a second. Remember when Isaac had to have a wife found for him? His father Abraham sent a servant, and the servant went out with a camel train of 10 camels laden with riches and stuff like that. And they did the same trip he's doing right now. It was a big deal. It was a big operation. But this time, no. Jacob is all by himself. He's been cast out of his home. His mom said, stay away until I send you a letter, but until then, don't come back because your brother Esau will kill you. After all, Esau has a reputation of being someone who can actually kill animals in the wild. So he knows how to kill people too. So Esau is a bad guy. Jacob is running for his life. Here he is out in the middle of nowhere. And all he's got as a companion is a rock for a pillow. He's never been up to the north where his mother's family is. He doesn't know who's up there. He doesn't know what's ahead. He doesn't know what's behind. He's kind of made his bed and now he's lying in it. But he's terrified about what the future is going to be. So here's where this dream comes. Verse 12. He had a dream. And behold, a ladder was set on the earth with its top reaching to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. Ever had a dream like this? Yeah, this is where we get the term Jacob's ladder. And again, to be fair with the language, we don't know that the word means ladder necessarily. It means thing that gets you up higher. It can mean steps. It was used about the stepping stones on the Tower of Babel, the stepping stones to get up on it. So it's just a way up and down. But he sees this structure with angels coming up and down, which literally means when the angels are going back up, that means that their task is done that they came down to do. The angels that are going down are coming to do something. So here he is in this place where angels are in process of getting stuff done and going back to heaven and coming down and doing more. There's actual interaction from God's perspective, from heaven in this place. It's like, whoa. So while he's having this dream, it goes on, 13. Behold, the Lord stood above it and said, now this is the top of the stairs of the ladder, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give it to you and to your descendants. So this is a clear reiteration of the promise God made to Abraham, his grandfather, and Isaac, his father. And it goes on with the same thing. Your descendants will also be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and in your descendants shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So this is straight promise that started with Abraham, that went through Isaac, and now is going through Jacob. And by the way, to be clear, if you haven't been with us before, when it says this blessing is going to pass on through him to all the descendants of the earth, that is the promise through Jesus, the seed of this entire promise for life eternal with God. That's what that is. So that's the promise going all the way through. So we talk about this as about the patriarchs and the promise. That's the promise. Now it's going to run through Jacob's family. Well, behold, I am with you, God says in the dream, and will keep you, and wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I've done what I have promised you. Now, this right here is a tremendous promise. You remember when Isaac faced a famine just not too long ago, when he faced a famine, God said, don't go running off to Egypt. Remember that? Don't go running off to Egypt to solve the problem with the famine. Stay. And what was God's two promises to him if you stay? I will be with you and I'll bless you. Now here, Jacob is on a run for his life. He's leaving the land, but he needs to leave the land. It's part of the promise. So now God in his graciousness says, if you leave the land, that's okay. You need to do this. But I want you to know that even though you're leaving the land, I'll still be with you. See the promise? Because it's really extraordinary. I am with you and will keep you wherever you go. These promises are a big deal. He says, I am with you. That's the same promise he made to Isaac. If you stay in the land, I'm with you. He says, I will keep you anywhere. Keep means I'll protect you and provide for you. I will bring you back. That is, this sojourn you make up to Haran, it's just a temporary thing, and I will bring you back to this place. And I will not leave you. Finally, I'll do all that I promised. So God, in a very gracious way, is saying to this deceiver who just came off of an episode that made his brother so mad he wants to kill him, God says, you're leaving, you think you're alone, but you're not alone. You think you're alone, but you're not alone. I'm with you, and I'll keep you, and I'll stay with you, and the promises will all happen. You are not on your own anymore. Now, he wakes up. And he says after sleeping, surely the Lord is in this place, and I didn't know it. I laugh every time I read that. Surely the Lord is in this place. I never knew it. You know when God's in a place when something crazy's going on. Moses knew that God was in the burning bush because, well, the bush is burning and it wasn't consumed. There's things that kind of tell you that God is in this place. But he says, I came to this place, and this was just a place that had a piece of dirt, and it got dark, and I put a rock under my head, and I just thought it was a piece of dirt in the middle of nowhere. But he says, Shazam. Well, doesn't really say that. But he says, look, God's actually in this place when I can't even see it. He's here. In a real sense, he's saying when God's promising, even though you're leaving, I will be with you. Even right now when I can't see him, he's here. And I never knew it. Now, what you see right here is you see Jacob starting to understand who this God of his father, Abraham, his grandfather Abraham, is like. This is the God who's always near. He's the God who's always near. God was here and I never knew it. He was afraid. Why was he afraid? Because he was by himself? That could possibly be it. We don't know. I'm going to guess. You know what my guess is? Because he just did one of the most dastardly things you can think of in all the Bible. And now that he's where God is, who is always a God of justice, how do we know that his dream isn't going to end where God just kills Jacob and says, that's it, buddy. I'm giving everything to Esau, your brother, because you're a jerk. See, so it could be a judgment issue. He was afraid. God is in this place. That's what he's thinking. Well, he says this. He was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. This is the house of God. It's just a piece of dirt. When you think of the house of God, we normally think of temples is what we think of, a house in that sense. But he's saying, no, this is the house of God, because the house of God is wherever God decides to dwell. And where is he dwelling? Right here. That's what he's realizing. God is right here. This is his dwelling place. And this is the gateway to heaven. This is where somehow the heaven, which is really far away and you can't touch it and is separated from us, and earth, here God has decided to touch right here. By the way, that's always the idea. Anytime in the Bible, in the Old Testament, when it talks about the heavens is just a generic way of saying it's a place that I can't get to. There's actually 3 heavens mentioned in the Bible. Really? 3 levels of heaven? Well, no, 3 heavens. The first heaven, the place that you and I can't get to, is where the birds fly. It's about as far as I can get to it. So the birds fly in the heavens. The second level of heaven that's referred to many, many times is the place where the stars and the sun and the moon are. Can't get there either, but they're there. And then the third level of heaven is the place that's reserved for where God is. I can't get there even if I jump high enough. Can't do it. Okay, that's what's idea. So heaven is the place that's... Well, here, Jacob's saying, even though God is that far removed and I can't jump to where he is coming to me. He's coming here. It's the gateway. It's a gateway to heaven. So no longer is God for Jacob just a guy who's kind of separated and distant and off in that unavailable place that I can't jump up to and touch. God has decided to bridge that. God, with his initiative, has decided to bridge that. And he's coming here. And he's near, and he's right here. You got to understand that from an ancient false doctrine, a pagan kind of thinking about who God is and what God is like, if there is a God, this is very foreign. Even when you get to the Greek gods and the Roman gods and all that stuff, the gods are all they're really pretty distant. They're out there just kind of watching, and every now and then they throw a thunderbolt and stuff like that. It's very different. Here, this is the God who chooses to be near. This is very odd, he's saying. Very odd. So he does something special to commemorate. So Jacob rose early in the morning, took the stone that he'd put under his head, and he set it up as a pillar, and he poured oil on it. That's a way to consecrate something with a precious material. He poured oil on it to make it a special kind of a holy thing. And he called the name of the Lord, he called the name of that place Bethel. However, previously the name of the city has been Luz. I like Bethel better because Luz sounds dull. You want to go to Luz today? Every time in the Hebrew when you see Beth as part of a name, it's actually a kind of an English manipulation of the word Beit. It's like B-E-I-T. If you go to Israel today, you'll see Beit, 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 Beit. If you say Beit fast enough, it sounds like Beth. Beit means house. And El is the generic term for God. So Beth-El, Bet-El is the house of God. He just said that's what this place was, right? See, it's cool. So now you're a Hebrew scholar. Bet-El. I'm going to call this Bet-El, even though it had been called Luz. That's for people who are reading this who wondered where Bet-El is. Then Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will keep me on this journey that I take and will give me food to eat and garments to wear, and if I return to my father's house in safety, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone which I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. Wow. So he's making kind of a deal in a sense. Jacob is just starting to understand this God. God has made him a unilateral promise. I mean, if you leave town, you go all the way up there, I will always be with you. I'll keep you and I'll bring you back. I'll take care of you. I mean, we've got this. I'm with you the whole way. Jacob should have said, God is wonderful. Thank you, God. You're with me all the time. He's my God. But because he's in the process of changing into someone like his grandfather Abraham, he's saying, okay, here's the deal. If God does come good on all these promises, if he can really do this, if I come back here and he's taking care of me this entire time, then what? Then the Lord will be my God. Then he'll be my God. But first, God's got to put out. If God doesn't demonstrate who he is and that he's good to his word, I don't know if I want to embrace this God. Now, at this point, if I was writing the Bible, I'd hit him with a thunderbolt. Because God already promised unilaterally he was going to do this, and yet why isn't this thick-headed kid Jacob, why isn't he just kind of turning and going, okay, I'll follow you, God? But he says, no, God, I'll just take you at your word, and if you come through, then you can be my God. And you know, there's kind of an honest patience, or there's an honesty with Jacob, there's a patience with God. But there's an honesty with Jacob where he's saying, you know, okay, I'm gonna let this play through. I'm still trying to figure out who this God is. I believed in the promise coming from my grandfather to my father and to me. I sort of believe in that because it's like an inheritance thing. But this God who made the promise, I'm still kind of getting to know who this guy is. So we'll put him to the test. And interestingly enough, God honors it. At the very last thing, he says, I give a tenth to you. What do we call that? It's a tithe. But this is before the law for tithing had come in. It was very much a generic statement in that time, through the ancient time, and you just got to think of this, is that if you were a sharecropper, that is, if you were working a piece of land for its farm equivalent and you're raising crops, but you don't own the land, you know what you do as a way of paying back the owner of the land when you do really well raising crops on his land? You give him a percentage, and that percentage is always a tenth. It's always a tenth. So what he's saying here is, God, if you do all this stuff, even if I work hard, even if I sharecrop this land in that sense, and good things come to me, I'm going to constantly recognize that you are the one that owns this land and not me. So I'll always give a tenth back to you. If all this happens. So here's how it's all set up. So he said, if God is with me, if God will keep me, if God will provide for me, if God returns me safely to my home here, then I will do two things. I'll do two things. Number one, I'll call you my God. Number two, I'll make my offerings to you. I'll serve you. I'll sacrifice to you. I'll be yours from this point on. It is exactly a reverse offer. Yeah, that's why it's kind of twisted in a way, you know. If this were Abraham, his grandfather, or Isaac, his father, it probably wouldn't have gone like this. They're men of faith, but Jacob is building a faith in this God. So he says, if you do all these things, I'm going to hold you to these things, God, that I heard you say. Then you will be my God. Remember the primary formula, not the primary formula, the primary contract from the beginning of Genesis to Revelation, God with mankind, is this: if you will be my people, I will be your God. That's, you know, if you want to summarize the entire message of the Bible, that's pretty much it from cover to cover. If you will be my people, which means you'll love me and you'll serve me and you'll put your future in my hands, you know, recognize my sovereignty. But if you'll do that, I'll be your God. And we were talking earlier, it's very much a marital contract between a husband and a wife, the fiancé. If you'll be mine, I will be yours. So very much that's what's going on here. Jacob is saying, okay, I'm not going to make any promises ahead of time, but God, if you come through and you prove who you are, I'm yours, and I'll call you God, and we'll finish the contract. So that's where he's at. Well, let's get him up to his family's household up here, his mother's household up in Upper Syria. It's the upper part of the Euphrates River Valley up there. And let's see what happens up there. We're going to jump into 29. And from here until the end of the morning, I'm going to talk about the training of Jacob. The training of Jacob. Because Jacob he's not really a man of faith. He's a man of deception. God's got to sort of figure out a way with Jacob to work this out of him. And he's got an incredible plan in store. An incredible plan in store. God has already made his commitment to Jacob unilaterally. I'll be with you. I'll keep you. I'll get you back. So that's not an issue here. But what an issue is that Jacob is never going to really fully understand this God who he's building a faith in until he understands the depth of his own sin. What a jerk. We called him a scallywag last week, and for a long time we'll call him a scallywag. Jacob is a scallywag. He's a manipulator. He's a deceiver. And he's gotten his way up till now. There's been patience on the part of his father, patience on the part of his mother, patience on the part of God himself. But we got to sort of burn this out of this kid. And so God's going to start it right now. Oh, I love this. Are you ready? Here we go. This is a crazy thing. Chapter 29. So Jacob went on his journey. He came to the land of the sons of the east, which is the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley. He looked and he saw a well in the field. And behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it. For from that well they watered the flocks. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. That last line is really important because it was a way of protecting it so that the wrong people didn't use your well. So you put a really big, stinking large stone on top of it, and it had to guarantee that you had to have multiple men to get it open. So there he is. He's at this well out in the middle of nowhere, way up there in a place he's never been before. Verse 3, and then when all the flocks were gathered there, they would then roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep and put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. So the emphasis is when all the flocks, which means implicitly, when all the sheep herders were gathered together, so there's enough guys to do this. So he's at this well, and Jacob starts up a conversation with some of the guys there. So Jacob says to them, my brothers, where are you from? Because he's not exactly sure where he is. And they said, we are from Haran. This is where he was headed. So he said to them, well, do you know Laban, the son of Nahor? Laban is his mother's brother. That's who he was told to go visit. And they say, drum roll, yes, we know him. Whoa, what a coincidence. And he said to them, well, is it well with him? And he's not using a pun with well because we're to well. It just means, you with me? Okay, so is it well with him? And they said, it is well. And here's Rachel, his daughter, coming with the sheep. So she was one of the shepherdesses who was there. And he said, well, wait, behold, it's still high day. It's not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go back and pasture them. Put them outside. They said, well, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered. That is when all the shepherds are back to move the stone. And they roll the stone from the mouth of the well, and then we water the sheep. So we can't go back out. We got to water them, but there's not enough of us here. That's what they're saying. Great picture. Verse 9, so while he was still speaking with him, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. She was a shepherdess. Verse 10, so when Jacob saw Rachel, he heard voices in his head. No, he didn't. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. See, they were waiting for a lot of guys to move this stone. But you know what? Jacob got one look at Rachel, and he felt the strength of 10 men, and he moved the stone off the well. I know. That's exactly what the writer's trying to imply, that this guy, man, he sees Rachel, and he can move stones off of wells. I mean, he's literally lit up. He's on fire. He's, whoa, let me get that for you. Right? That's what's going on right here. So clearly he's become superhuman in a sense because he's seen this woman and went, wow. And he moves the stone for her. That's a nice picture of him actually moving it right there. It's probably much larger than that. So verse 11, then Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted his voice and wept. Now this is not a surreptitious, this is okay. This is what you do when you see relatives, because a little later they'll kiss each other when they recognize who they are. So really what he's doing, he's kissing her as his cousin. Kissing cousin, that's what it is. He's kissing her saying, I understand who you are. But in his heart, he realizes that somehow in this process of me going up to this foreign land, I don't know where I'm going, God has made this appointment. I'm with my uncle's family, and wow, he's got an incredible daughter. Actually, that's what I'm here for, is to find a wife. And he weeps. It's the first time we ever see Jacob weep. Now, Jacob will weep later on in the history. But this is one of those weepings where he realizes that even despite his ability to deceive and manipulate and control the future, he doesn't know what he's doing, but God has done it for him. I think it's part of the process of breaking him. God's done this for me, and he weeps. So Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son, and so she ran and she told her father. Nice picture of Laban. I like when he sticks his hands in his belt. That's kind of nice. Okay, 13. So when Laban heard the news of Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. See, kissed? That's the same kiss, okay. And then he related to Laban, that is, Jacob related to Laban all these things. He told him what's going on and why he's in town. So Laban, he said to him, surely you are my bone and my flesh. This is his nephew. He suddenly realizes who this is. And so he stayed with him for a month. So Jacob decides to stay with him for a month without much stated intention. I'll just stick around. I'm here from a long ways away. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles on foot. He stays with him for a month. Now, Laban at this point looks like a pretty nice, hospitable guy. I mean, after all, he ran to the well with excitement, anticipation to meet his sister's son. That's pretty cool. But Laban's going to turn shades on us here in a second. So here's the two guys. Then Laban says to Jacob, verse 15, because you're my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? So tell me, what shall your wages be? So clearly, it implies that for that month that Jacob was working pretty hard on Laban's farm. Now, Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. So two daughters he's got, an older one, Leah, a younger one. And so he describes them right here and says that Leah's eyes were weak. We're not exactly sure what that means. I don't know. Maybe she was cross-eyed. We don't really know. But he's mentioning it as a way of kind of taking a little one notch off of who Leah is in terms of desirable. Because when he talks about Rachel, he says, wow, Rachel, beautiful of form, that's this stuff, and face. So clearly he's painting the picture that Rachel is a hubba and Leah has weak eyes. See, the only thing I can think of is when you see movies done like this, they'll give Leah these big fat Coke bottle glasses, and she'll be looking like this all the time. So anyway, here's the two daughters. The interesting thing is Leah's the older, and in the ancient cultures, even to this day, the younger ones don't get married before the older. You kind of work your way down. Because if the younger ones start getting married, then everyone who's a friend of the family you're going to marry to and stuff like that, they're going to pick off the younger, nicer, not weak-eyed ones, and you're going to have old maids left at the top. So you may marry them off from top to bottom. So that's what's going to go on, and this is setting up how the story is going to go. Well, Jacob loved Rachel. So he said, tell you what, Laban, you asked me what my pay is. This is it. I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter, Rachel. 7 years. And Laban said, well, it's better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Sure, stay with me. 7 years. Now, contrast this again with the whole issue about finding a wife for Isaac. Isaac, has a servant sent up there. He goes up there with 10 camels and lots of riches. And a lot of those riches are meant so that when you get to the marriage proposal section, you can say, I'll take Rebekah and I'll give you all this stuff to pay for it. It's kind of a marriage price is what it was, the dowry in that sense. Jacob is up there with nothing. He turns his pockets out. He's got nothing. What's he going to do for a dowry for this girl that he's fallen in love with? So he says to his uncle, I'll work for you 7 years. 7 being a number of completeness, which means 7 years, I will have basically paid my dues. Can I buy your daughter for that? And it's not really buying your daughter. It's like saying, I'm taking a precious resource of your household. It's the bride price. I want to do what's fair. I'll work for you for 7 years. And Laban's thinking, hot dog, free labor. This is great. Okay, I'd rather give her to you than some stranger. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her.
So good.
Pitter patter. Seemed like just a few days. So Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed, then I go into her. So his seven years elapses, and he's done. He's ready. Goes to Laban and says, we're done. So Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast, presumably for a wedding. And now in the evening, he took his daughter Leah, the one with the weak eyes. He takes the daughter Leah, brought her to him, presumably to her tent, and Jacob went into her, had relations with her. And Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. That was common practice at Helpa. Zilpah. Yeah, Zilpah. So we had this wonderful occasion in this wedding, and Jacob thinks he's getting Rachel, and he gets Leah with the weak eyes.
You're doing it so good.
Sorry, okay, I'll stop doing that. Okay, so it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. This is one way that the narrator who's writing Genesis, he wants you to kind of get into Jacob's shoes for a second. He doesn't say, well, it came about in the morning that it turns out that it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. He's actually saying what Jacob said in the morning. So it's kind of draws you into be in his shoes for a second. He wakes up in the morning and, it was Leah. So he goes to Laban and he says, what is this you've done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me? And now you start to get the understanding about the training program that God has this guy on, right? Because Jacob is the consummate deceiver who always controlled and manipulated and got his way without too much of a care for what the consequences to other people were as long as he got his way. Okay, we'll go back to that in a few minutes. So what does Laban say? Hey, listen, it's not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Which is true. That's the tradition. Wish I'd known that. Yeah. Okay. So 27. So Laban comes up with we can work this out, my nephew. Tell you what, complete the week of this one. Week is shorthand for 7 years. A week is 7 long, so that means 7 years. A week is 7 years. Complete the week of this one, talking about Rachel, and we'll give you the other also for the service which you shall serve with me for another 7 years. So here's the deal. If 7 years is what you're willing to pay for Rachel, and you already paid it thinking you got Rachel, but you got Leah, let's do another 7 years. What do you think? Now, what do you do as Jacob? I mean, you're a deceiver. You know what this guy's doing to you. You've met someone who is a better deceiver than you are. And he's taking you down. Do you put up with this? What do you think? Yeah, that's right. I thought they would dicker at this point. I thought they would start to go back and forth and say, 7, well, let's talk about maybe 4, back and forth. No, because it turns out that 7 was the appropriate price for Rachel to start with. That's what he offered. So if he wants to really get Rachel, he's not going to be able to cut a deal. He's going to have to stay with 7. That's what he originally offered. It's like going to a car dealership and saying, I'll give you $10,000 for that car, and then coming back and saying, I'd like to change that. Nope, you said $10,000. I'm going to take your first offer. So he's going back to his first offer, $10,000, 7 years. Well, Jacob, remember, is in love with Rachel. So Jacob did so. He completed her week, the 7 years, and he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. And Laban also gave his maid Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her maid. Standard kind of care procedure. Yep. So now he's been there 14 years trying to get Rachel. And now he's finally got her. And he's got Rachel. And Leah. And both of their maids in the process. Oh my gosh. It's getting kind of messy. So Jacob went in to Rachel also, that's consummating the marriage, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for another 7 years. So he's got the 7 years done, he's got the wife that he always wanted, but now he's also got a second wife, Leah, who he doesn't really love, and that's going to cause a world of problems. So when you get to here in, verse 31, now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, that she was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So Leah conceived and bore a son and named him Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. The name of Reuben is in that part about the Lord seeing my affliction. So now they start having babies. And the Lord looks on Leah and realizes that this is kind of a bad deal. Leah got stuck in this thing because 2 deceivers are at battling each other to the death, and Leah got caught in it, and now Leah's married to this guy, and she's not loved by him. So it figures, let's start having babies, and that'll change how your husband views you. And that's what Leah's thinking as well. If I start having babies, then my husband will start loving me. By the way, turn on your comparison techniques to compare this to what we know about present-day polygamy problems in the household, okay? Because it's all going to come to roost right here. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to chart the babies right now, because this is going to turn into a fertility war between Leah and Rachel. Because Rachel is the one whom he loves, and so he presumably sleeps with her most often. Leah is the one he doesn't love, and so these babies are going to be a tool to try and gain his affection. So it's like a horse race. I'm going to do this like a horse race right here, and we're going to have the fertility wars right here. So we're going to start right here. The first one, Reuben. Yay, Reuben. So there's poor Jacob wondering what's going on here. Okay, well, it gets crazier. Verse 33, and she conceived again, Leah, and she bore a son, and said, well, okay, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon. It's about the fact that the Lord heard him. And so, boom, now we have Simeon. And they're off to the races. Then she conceived again, and she bore a son. Now this time my husband will become attached to me. See, it's about his affections. Because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore, he was named Levi. And so now we have Levi. So it's 3-0 so far. It's a total 3-0. How far do you have to go when you call a match based on someone not making any scores? A skunk? I forget what it's. Anyway, it's 3-0 so far on our score. Verse 35, and she conceived again, and she bore a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Therefore she named him Judah. And then she stopped bearing. So there's Judah. But then something goes awry in her equipment, and she goes barren. So this is where you would think that things would change, and suddenly the 4-0 score would get changed, and Rachel would become fertile. Well, the story doesn't go that way. Verse 1 of chapter 30. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, it's 4-0. She became jealous of her sister wife. That's where polygamists get sister wife from, by the way. She became jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, you're going to love this. I laughed out loud when I read this. Okay, here we go. She said to Jacob, give me children or else I die. I know, isn't this crazy? It's, give me children or else I die. And of course, Jacob comes back with the perfect response. Jacob's anger burned against Rachel, and he said, Am I in the place of God who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb? Give me children or I die. What do you think I am, God? So this presumes the fact that they've been having relations all along, because Rachel is the wife that he loves, right? And she's saying, listen, this isn't going to work. Leah's got a big head start, 4-0. All of the inheritance is going to go to the sons. The firstborn son is on Leah's side. 4-0. We got to do something about this. And Jacob says, what am I supposed to do? Which presumes that he's already doing everything he can think of, which, okay? So what's going to happen? So she has a great idea, which is not a great idea. Well, here's my maid, Bilhah. Go into her that she may bear on my knees, that through her I too may have children. I know! You gotta be kidding me. This did not work well for Abraham, his grandfather, either. And that was Sarah's idea as well. Well, she says, let's just be practical about this. If I'm barren and I'm not making children, at least I have a handmaiden with my maid. You can have sex with her, and then those babies count to my score. They count to my score. For the, instead of the Leah team, they count for the Rachel team. So woohoo, we would gain points on that one. Well, so he agrees to this. Now we got to chart Bilhah, who's the handmaiden of Rachel. Bill, you don't like that name? Bilhah, I know it's not very flattering, is it? Yeah, well... Anyway, okay, so here's Bilhah. Well, verse 4. So she gave him her maid Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob went into her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. And then Rachel said, this is how she named the son, God has vindicated me and has indeed heard my voice and has given me a son. Therefore, she named him Dan. Dan is included in this whole idea up here. Okay, vindicated me. So now we have Dan in the Bilhah line, but that's part of the Rachel team. So that's okay. So that counts on the Rachel side. So now it's 4-1. Okay. Well, Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. So Rachel said, see, Rachel gets to name the kids. With mighty wrestlings I have wrestled with my sister, and I have indeed prevailed. And so she named him Naphtali. Naphtali means about this prevailing over wrestling. So boom, we have Naphtali. So now the score is 4-2. So we're coming closer. That's right. And when Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took her maid, Zilpah, and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Rachel, if you can do that, I can do that too. You see, it's a fertility war. It's the craziest thing. It's a fertility. So she gives her maid to her husband. So now we got to plot Zilpah too. Okay. So Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son, and then Leah said, remember, Leah gets to name him, how fortunate. So she named him Gad. That's the word fortunate right there. So boom. So there we have Gad. Oh, Gad. So now remember, Gad counts in Team Leah because we're using Leah's maid, okay? So that's a Team Leah score right there. So now we're at 5-2. And it continues. Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. And then Leah said, happy am I, for women will call me happy. So she named him Asher, which means I'm happy. So boom. Now we're at score 6-2, Leah over Rachel, Team Rachel. Isn't this something else? I mean, you can't make this up. This is just crazy. Okay. Verse 14, now in the days of wheat harvest, Reuben went. Now Reuben's the oldest son, remember? He's old enough now. He went out and he found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. We're not exactly sure what a mandrake is, but it's something that grows in the field. Many times there's thinking that these mandrakes, these plants, are plants that had traditional meaning for fertility. But we don't know much more beyond that. Anyway, it's something that's desired. So he picks these in the field and brings them to his mother Leah. But then Rachel says to Leah, hey, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. By the way, I've started color-coding the names and the pronouns because it gets a little complicated. So please give me some of your son's mandrakes, says Rachel to the mother of Reuben, Leah. Yeah, we're not exactly sure. It's something that grows in the field that might have something to do with fertility traditions. We're not sure. Well, so Leah responds. Leah says to her, is it a small matter for you to take my husband? And would you take my son's mandrakes also? This is something else. I mean, so clearly Leah's a little bitter about the fact that Rachel seems to be getting all the time with Jacob. And to Leah, that's a way of actually stealing her husband. Like, you've got him all the time. So you're stealing my husband and you're sleeping with him all the time. You've stolen my husband too. And you think nothing little of that, and now you're asking for my mandrakes too? I know, it's crazy. You read this and it rings so true to human nature. Oh gosh. So you want my son's mandrakes too? I mean, you're stealing my husband. Go ahead, steal my mandrakes. So Rachel says, okay, he may lie with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. So clearly Jacob was spending more time with Rachel in bed than he was with Leah. And so she figures, if that's all it takes for me to get some mandrakes, sure, you can sleep with him tonight. Yes. And all the hassle we see right here too. Okay, so when Jacob came in from the field in the evening, this was a blindsider to him. When he came in from the field in the evening, Leah went out to him and said, "Oh, you must come into me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. I bought you for tonight with some mandrakes, so you got to sleep with me." And what's Jacob supposed to say coming in off the field? You got to sleep with me tonight because I bought you with mandrakes. Well, what's going on here? We don't know what his response is. But he did lay with her that night. No. So God gave heed to Leah, and she conceived. And she bore Jacob a fifth son. And Leah said, God has given me my wages. Mandrakes. Has given me my wages because I gave my maid to my husband. So she named him Issachar. That comes from the word for wages. And boom. So Team Leah has another one by Leah now. Woohoo. So now the score is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7-2. Rachel's way far behind. She's got to get with the action here. But now Leah is purchasing time in the marital bed from Rachel by using mandrakes. Story's gotten just really warped and twisted beyond all imagination. So Leah conceived again, and bore a sixth son to Jacob. And then Leah said, God has endowed me with a good gift. Now my husband will dwell with me. He'll stay with me, which implies not with Rachel, because I have borne him, count them, 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun. And afterwards she bore a daughter and named her Dinah. Yeah, kind of an afterthought. Anyway, so now we've got another son up here, Zebulun. So now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on Team Leah against 2, Team Rachel. And Rachel still hasn't borne any children yet. Where are the girls in this? Then God remembered Rachel. Okay, God remembered Rachel, and God gave heed to her and opened her womb. So she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And so she named him Joseph. It's about taking away reproach, saying, may the Lord give me another son. So she gets Joseph, but at the end of getting Joseph, she says, but I don't want to stop here. May God give me another son. Just one more. That would be just great. So now down to Team Rachel, we have Joseph down there. So now the score is 8-3, Team Leah over Team Rachel. And 8 plus 3 is 11. There's 12 tribes of Israel. There's one to come. Trivia time. Know who that guy is? Benjamin. Yeah, Benjamin is still to come, but he's 3 chapters from now. He's like the little kid that gets born kind of late in the family, you know. So he's still to come. But here in this fertility war, and we're going to kind of stop with this, I went through this as fast as possible to show you how just crazy this is. Jacob went up to find a wife. What he got was a maelstrom hurricane of fighting estrogen is what he got. He may have had some benefits in bed, but you got to understand that this is just craziness because Leah is bitter because he basically stiff arms her, keeps her away, doesn't sleep with her. He loves Rachel, but Rachel's not having any babies. Rachel's not happy because she's not having any babies, even though Jacob's spending time with her. She decides, oh, this is a good idea. Let's start using the maid thing because it worked for Grandpa Abraham. Not well. And, you know, it gets worse and worse. It's one of the messiest situations in the entire Bible. And the fact that God would use these 12 sons to establish the 12 tribes of Israel blows my mind. But he does. So let's just summarize the training of Jacob. If I was Jacob, this is what I would be thinking. Deceivers can be taken by more clever deceivers. See, a deceiver is someone who wants to control a situation. He wants to make you think something that's not true for his own benefit, for his own purposes. And in doing so, these deceivers, they look at the lay of the land, they figure out the pros and cons, they figure out the way that people are going to work, and they manipulate the thing and control it, and they deceive and they twist and warp perspectives on reality for their benefit. It's very much like playing God. It's very much like playing God. I mean, if you wanted to play God, but you could not physically change people's reality, you couldn't physically change the reality of the circumstances, the next best thing is to make people think that the reality is different. That's why Satan is called a great deceiver. He's the father of lies. Satan really doesn't have the power God does to actually change reality with a word, and that's what God does. He spoke, and light came into being. He spoke, and God can speak, and reality changes. Satan pretty much can only speak and change how you think things are. It's a near God kind of thing. The problem is that when we resort to deception like Jacob does, we don't have as good a grasp of the totality of the situation. And we certainly don't ever think that there might be another deceiver in the crowd who's better at it than we are. Because controllers think that they're better than everybody else. And they're controlling the situation. They're controlling people's view of reality. One of the ways that God's training Jacob is, you know what? You are not the top of some heap. There's much better deceivers in the world that can take you down. And he's done it. And his name is Laban. And now how's that working out for you, Jacob? I mean, Laban was looking for some free labor. 14 stinking years of free labor from you. How's that feeling, Jacob? Huh? Think you're in charge of things, Jacob? You think this deception thing is a really good idea? Well, no, because he made me stay here 14. Yeah, that's right. And when you deceive, it hurts. And you're feeling that right now. And you're going to live with Laban's ability to deceive for the rest of your life. It's taken kind of the sweetness of deception from his mouth when you're the one that suffers because someone else is better at it, right? Deceivers make messes. This is the worst mess in the Old Testament. The estrogen hurricane is what I call it. I mean, this is a crazy situation. Jacob came with a very simple idea to come up to his mother's family, do just like the servant of his father Isaac did. Go up there, go to a well, find a woman, have wonderful things, pay for her, bring her back on the camels, all is well that lives well, and it's just wonderful. And by the time I get back home, Esau's anger will have dissipated, and it'll just be wonderful. Couple weeks, 14 years. And it's caused one of the messiest family situations you can dream of. Yeah, Larry, you going to say? Oh, what a great insight. Yeah, Larry says, can you learn something from Jacob's response to being deceived versus Esau's? Esau's response to being deceived was, let's kill him. Not really great. Jacob seems to be just rolling with it now. I think I've really never thought through this, but clearly he doesn't have an anger reaction. He's just kind of putting up with it, which is an interesting thing. I would think that if he was a consummate deceiver, he would try and counter-deceive to get what he wants, but he doesn't seem to try even. Yeah, he could have just tried to take her, do an elopement. Yeah. Yeah, right, Laban, bye. Yeah, so he really is, he's painted throughout this entire section as being pretty docile, really. I think that's part of the training in process. He's realizing he's in way over his head by someone who's much better at deceiving than he is. And because of that deception, he's just got one of the messiest family situations. By the way, the family situation with the sons they grew up is not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. So we are seeing the seeds here of, again, world-class family dysfunction right here because of the deception of Laban is what's going on. Deceivers make messes. I was going to say deceivers make messes because although they think they can control all the circumstance and they understand all the outcomes, they're not. They can't because they're not God. They make huge messes. Also, deceivers can take years off your life. So it's not just a small thing that can happen. They can actually rob you, and he did here, robbed him of 14 years of his life. It can change lives. Deception can change lives. So you could make a list. I made a much longer list thinking, what is Jacob dealing with right now? But this whole incident with Laban is the deceiver meets the consummate deceiver. And he suffers and understands the outcome of that kind of work. God still seems to be working through all this foolishness. He's still sovereign over all this mess. Yeah. Which again doesn't give us license to be silly and do stupid things. But the issue is that God's plan and his promise is much more sovereign than our ability to make messes. And that's true in the long term, and that's true today as well, to this very moment. I mean, God wants to involve us in the propagation of his promise through Jesus, just like he wants to involve Jacob in the propagation of his promise to the whole world. And all the messes and sillinesses that we can get involved in are not going to change the sovereignty of that plan. So really, what he should be thinking, the solution is, let's just let God rule. Let's let God rule this situation. I'm going to stop deceiving. I'm going to try and stop taking for myself what I think we should do to manipulate and construe and control. I'm going to stop doing all that stuff because all it's doing is it's creating messes and hurt and unjustness in people's lives. Let's just let God rule. Now, I've always thought, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to rewrite the Bible again, but I always wondered what it would have been like if Jacob had gone up to Haran and he had decided at this very last line, I'm going to let God rule in this situation. Now, he might have actually been thinking that. We're not really too sure because we don't hear him say much. But what is very definitely true is that he submits to this, and he just lets God rule. He doesn't counter-deceive, which is an astonishing thing to me. He seems to have abandoned that halfway through the process. He decides, I'm just going to let God rule. From this point on in his life, deception is nearly non-existent in the life of Jacob, which is interesting. Because he started out as a baby coming out of the womb trying to grab onto his brother's heel, kind of to yank him down saying, I want to be first instead, see? So his name means someone who takes the place of by deceiving, to usurp in that sense. But you know what? That characteristic of Jacob as being a scalawag deceiver controller starts to just go away instantly from here. Now, so you keep your eyes open, you look for it, you watch for it. We'll see what happens. But it's very clear because of this, because he has met his match in Laban, who is the grand marshal of deceivers. Something about deception, it just doesn't taste good in his mouth anymore. Now, to kind of wrap this up, it's interesting because God does sort of a similar thing with us. What he does is he gives us his promises unilaterally. He says it has nothing to do with you being a non-scallywag to start with, because I know what kind of a scallywag you can be. But I need to start burning some of this stuff out of your life. And I'm doing this in a way not to be cruel, and not because because I like to whack you because you did stuff wrong, and so I'm going to bring down some justice and condemnation. It's really not about that. What God does in the process, like he does with Jacob, what he does with us, is he puts us through circumstances that changes our taste for sin. And we go through those things and go, sin doesn't taste quite as good or quite as productive as I always thought it had been. It doesn't taste very good. The consequences stink. It leaves messes. It hurts people. Just don't like the taste of it much anymore. Now, I can go back and I can look at the course of my life, from the day that I gave my life to the Lord, and he unilaterally made promises with me and said, hey, while you run around and sojourn in this place, I'll always be with you, I'll bless you, I'll keep you, and I'll bring you back to me. I mean, God said that. And I was still a jerk. So were you. And so when he did that, then he took me on a course that wasn't really without problems. The course of life that I've been on has had great blessings from God, but I've also gone through some incredibly messy weirdnesses in life. Some of them because I started them, some of them because others did it to me, but it was the same thing I would do. And in the process, God has said, so how is that tasting right now, Jim? Pretty bad. But God's promise is to be with us and to be near us, just like he did with Jacob and did with Isaac and did with Abraham. His promise through Jesus is to be near us. But he's still going to burn some of that stuff out of your taste so that when the opportunity for sin comes, you go, nah, don't think so. It's a bad trade. I'm going to rest in the loving kindness of God in my life rather than control, manipulate, deceive so I get what I want. I think I will be content with the loving kindness of God because after all, he promised he'll always be with me and he'll bless me. I'll just stay right here. That's what a Christian life really sounds like. And that's what God's trying to do to Jacob. And he'll do a little bit more. But remember, God reproves those he loves. He's trying to burn some of the stuff out of us. There's some stuff in my kids' lives I'd like to burn out of them. And not because they're irritating to me, but because I want them just not to rely on them anymore. I want their taste to change for those things. And to realize that life itself comes from God, trusting God, looking for his blessing, expecting his nearness, rather than trying to manipulate, control, and deceive. And that's what this guy right here is starting to learn. Jacob, which means usurper, the guy who tries to take it from you. Okay, let's quit. Here we go. Father, we do thank you for these incredible stories of these real people who struggled with real things. And Lord, we see a lot of us in them. Lord, forgive us and have patience with us when we whine over the tough times. But Lord, when we go through those tough times, I pray that you wouldn't allow us to waste them. I pray that you'd use those things in the turmoil of those times, in the confounded confusion that we suffer through, for you to give us an understanding about sin, about our taste and our predisposition for it, and to realize that it really is it's not only not productive in our lives, but it's destructive. It creates messes. And we'll never be in the place you are in terms of understanding reality so that we can control and manipulate well enough that we don't leave brokenness behind. And that's what sin's all about. So God, we pray that you would continue to impress upon our hearts your desire, your unilateral promise to be near us, to be with us, to keep us, to provide for us, and to bless us as we turn to you and away from ourselves, that we might receive from you. So thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.